The New York Mets have won their third series in a row to start the season. They did not get the sweep of the Arizona Diamondbacks, but at least they got the job done on Sunday with a great performance by David Peterson to start the game, by the Mets bullpen throughout to complete the shutout, and by the Mets offense to finally break through and score some runs late, capped off by a 2-run homer by Pete Alonso. On today's show, I will recap the last couple of games, how the Mets fared at the end of that series against the Diamondbacks. I also want to talk about this Mets starting rotation, which has been by far the best in baseball to start the year. David Peterson, Tyler McGill, Carlos Carrasco, all of these guys outperforming expectations. Then in the final segment of the show today, I will preview what lies ahead. A huge series coming up against the San Francisco Giants, the two best teams in the National League, square off for 4 games. It's going to be a lot of fun baseball this week, and we'll have you covered with all of it on Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So the New York Mets lost a game on Saturday, which might have had you frustrated as a Mets fan, and rightfully so. It's never great to spend your Saturday watching the Mets play and just see no offense whatsoever. And then you see Seth Lugo blow the game. Then there's the cries again about these bullpen problems and what's going to happen with the Mets this year if they can't figure out this pen. Well, here's what I'd say to that. You're going to lose some ball games. You're going to be frustrated 65 times a year in an incredible season, right? The Mets go out and they win 97 games this year. There's still going to be 65 Saturdays or days like it throughout the year where you're going to be frustrated. And so, personally, when I saw the loss on Saturday, I said, all right, well, no need to overreact to it because there's a game on Sunday. And the Mets got the job done on Sunday. That's what you need. You have to win series. Of course, as I mentioned on the bonus podcast I did after the big win in the home opener, I said the Mets should sweep that team. And you know what? They probably should have. That's a bad baseball team. And you have to sweep as many of those teams as possible because that allows you to lose a series against the Giants this week. The Giants are coming into town, 4 games, really good pitchers. If you lose 3 or 4 against the Giants, really no harm, no foul. It's a good team. But you might be wishing you had an extra game back when you had that opportunity against the Diamondbacks. Still, though, there was positives to draw from every game, as there has been all year, and particularly because every single game, we're seeing the Mets get a quality effort from their starting pitcher. And Saturday, it was Carlos Carrasco, who looked great, had 8 strikeouts over 5 innings pitched, allowed 3 hits, walked 2, just looked great altogether. I'm going to talk about the starting pitching in the next segment, so I don't want to spend too much time on that now, but he looked like the Carrasco that we thought the Mets were getting when they traded for him in the Francisco Lindor deal. And to the Diamondbacks' credit and to Zach Gallen's credit, he looked very good for them early as well. So sometimes you face a team that's going to pitch well against you. That game ended up going sideways because of the bullpen, but Joely Rodriguez, if you want to take another positive, looked decent in that game. He had a strong first inning coming out of the pen first for Carrasco. He went back out to face a lefty the next inning. He gives up a run. He gets the loss, but it's not really his fault because that hit that he gave up, which came around with Lugo on the mound when he gave up a home run, it was a blue pit. It was put just perfectly where there was no play on it. The exit velocity on it couldn't have been more than like 70 miles per hour. You can't blame Joely Rodriguez on that. So we'll see if he can build off of it and be better moving forward. As I said, Lugo did not have a good day. He's now had 3 good games, 2 bad games, and he is generally a slow starter throughout his career. So hopefully he can sort of shake off a bad first month and get back into the swing of things. But that is something to look at moving forward. He is starting to fall down, a peg after peg in that bullpen, because now Drew Smith is, in my opinion, far ahead of him with the way he's looked at the early stages of this season. But you still got a good inning out of Trevor May. Adam Ottavino worked around a lot of self-induced traffic, but he pitched a strong inning. And Starling Marte had a 2-run homer. So the Mets still showed fight. If there was 10 innings in that game, I think they'd probably win it, but they ran out of time, and that's going to happen. On Sunday, David Peterson takes the mound in a rubber match. Not necessarily what you would have wanted heading into the year. You'd be nervous about it. But Peterson has looked great to start the season. He goes 4 1/3 scoreless, strikes out 4. Trevor Williams comes on, gets the last two outs of the 5th. He did strand an inherited runner from Peterson. Then in the 6th, he gives up a leadoff double, which brings me to my guy, Chasen Shreve. I tweeted this out. My love for Chasen Shreve knows no bounds. I wanted him back ever since the Mets non-tendered him inexplicably last season. He was so good in 2020. It made zero sense to me why they cut him. They end up cutting him last year and they get Aaron Loop. So in a certain sense, that transaction worked out. But now Shreve has come back around. He's been great early in the season. Definitely the best lefty in that bullpen right now. He retired all 6 of the batters he faced, stranding that runner on second base that was on when he came into the game. Has a 1.69 ERA in the season, and he got a win because in the bottom of the 6th, the Mets rallied. You had Lindor get a base hit. Eduardo Escobar doubled to put 2 runners in scoring position. Actually, excuse me, misspoke there. Eduardo Escobar doubled. I forgot. The Diamondbacks made a boneheaded play. A throwing error allowed Pete Alonso to come around to score. Alonso's on first base because when he came up with Lindor on first, he popped up, and Perdomo of the Diamondbacks made a heads-up play, letting the ball drop so they could exchange runners. But Pete Alonso was still fast enough to score from first all the way around on that double by Escobar, especially because of the errant throw. That gave the Mets their first lead. Escobar would later come in when J.D. Davis got a base hit. Dominic Smith had walked before J.D. Davis got his hit, so he was on first base, went first to third on the single, and then he came around to score on a sacrifice fly by James McCann. The Mets had a 3-0 lead, and then Pete Alonso in the following inning, in the bottom of the 7th, delivers the death nail for the Diamondbacks, hits a 2-run homer. That gave him his 14th RBI of the season, which now has him leading the National League and has him on pace for 227 RBIs. I'm going to keep saying the on-pace stats for Alonso as long as they're this video game crazy. But he's been great as a DH this year. Once again, in a DH role, he's driving in runs. I don't think there really is any correlation to that, but it is just something that has happened this year. When he's been the DH, he has, for whatever reason, produced better offensively. One thing I will say about this Mets team, what you saw this weekend, what is more impressive about it than I think anything else is that going into the home opener, they lost Brandon Nimmo and Mark Canha to COVID. And you didn't feel that loss at all. Travis Jankowski has done a good job, but it's just the collective of this team. It's why I wanted Jeff McNeil on this roster, and I was arguing for it so much throughout the offseason because unlike a Chris Bryant, Jeff McNeil is a stellar defender wherever you put him. I try to tell some of you who didn't believe in Jeff McNeil, the eye test, in my opinion, has always showed me that he's good defensively. For some people, I guess they didn't see it, but the metrics tell us he's good defensively wherever you put him. And he's played a great left field with Canha and Nimmo out. He made an incredible catch running into the wall. He looks really good out there. And with that flexibility, you can have Robinson Cano start a game at second, or Louis Guillorme start a game at second. Dominic Smith being able to come into the lineup now and get more at bats with those guys out. You just don't take a big step back if you lose 1 or 2 guys here, and that's what you need to make it through the season. The depth the Mets have built when you look at Peterson and McGill at the back of the rotation, and then guys like Jankowski, Dom, McNeil being flexible, having all that depth has helped the Mets win all 3 of these series, and they're in a great position to just keep things rolling as we continue this MLB season. What I want to talk about next, though, is that starting rotation. It's the best in baseball right now. How are they doing it? I'll explain more in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you about betonline.net, which is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. I have an absolutely mind-boggling stat for you. Since earned runs became official in both leagues in 1913, the New York Mets have the best ERA through 10 games in MLB history at 1.07. And you look at the other teams on this list. The Braves, 1920, had a 1.12 ERA. The Cubs, 1963, had a 1.13 ERA. And then some team in the Super Bass had a 1.19 ERA in 1913. All of that was courtesy of Sarah Langs on Twitter at SLangs on Sports. But her stat just illuminates how good this Mets team has been. That they are pitching better than some teams did in the dead ball era. That is incredible. The way that baseball has evolved, how these hitters are going for broke, the fact that there hasn't been any games up to this point, and we're knocking on wood for sure, that this Mets team has just gotten to a situation where Nick Castellanos is a 3-run homer in the first inning. The fact that that hasn't happened through 2 turns in this rotation when you lost Jacob deGrom, when you lost Taijuan Walker, it's incredible. And it's a testament to Tyler McGill and David Peterson, who, as we said all off season, if you go into the year with McGill and Peterson as your 6 and your 7, you have good starter depth. And they're showing you right now why that's the case, because these guys have gone out and neither of them has given up a run. They have been absolutely sensational. And Peterson is even more surprising than McGill, because I think all of us had McGill ahead of Peterson on the depth chart for a reason. He pops more when you watch him. He's the type of pitcher that if everything broke right and one day Tyler McGill was an ace of a team, we would not be completely floored by it, because he's 6'7" and he's got a fastball that can touch 100 at any point. So when you see Tyler McGill with that stuff, the fact that he came into the league a little bit raw and seems to just be refining his stuff every single year, every single start, you just see him add some wrinkles and just get more comfortable out there. The sky's the limit for McGill, but for Peterson, there was a lot of doubt. He had a bad year last year, but again, this is why I try to provide context for all of these guys, because it's not black and white when we're examining a season. David Peterson last year was essentially a rookie. I know it was his second season, but let's really think about his first season in 2020. He pitched in empty ballparks. And I'm telling you right now, when you're pitching in empty ballparks in the COVID year, the atmosphere is completely different than stepping into a ballpark with 30,000 fans. It just is. Home fans or road fans, because even when you're standing in front of the home crowd, if you're Peterson, there's pressure there to deliver. So I'm not saying that is the entire reason he struggled last year. And he dealt with his injuries as well. So there's multiple things that came into it. But the sophomore slump he had, I think you really have to give him a little bit more of a pass, understanding that not only was it going into a season with expectations because of what he did as a rookie, but then also pitching in an environment that you've never pitched in before, despite having the reputation of being a sophomore, being in that second year. And so he struggled. And I didn't come into this year with the highest of hopes for David Peterson, but what we know about Peterson is if he can be refined with his stuff, if he can attack batters the way he needs to attack batters, which is at times nibbling around the edges, but it's a matter of locating that fastball and that sinker. If he gets that sinker low to get the ground balls, if he can elevate that fastball to change the eye level to set up the sinker, if he can have that slider working for him, he is a pitcher that's going to get a lot of ground balls. He's going to pitch to contact, and he's going to give you a chance. He might not ever be a guy that's going to go out and give you 7 scoreless innings. But if he can give you a really good 5 innings every time out as the 7th starter in this rotation while you're waiting for deGrom and Walker to come back, he's doing his job, and he can have a role in this Mets team for years as that 5th, 6th starter. And who knows, maybe he continues to progress and he shows that what he's doing right now is repeatable. And maybe he has a little bit of a higher ceiling than we expected. Maybe he can be a 3 starter one day. I don't know if I necessarily see that. I think he's probably always going to be a back end guy, but what we've seen early is he has looked great this year. He's sharp. He has an approach. It seems like he's comfortable on the mound. There was an inning in this game where he had some really bad luck. Starling Marte unable to catch a ball because of the sun, that goes down as a double. It's unfair to the pitcher that happens. I wish it would be called an error, but the way Major League Baseball scores things, if the outfielder doesn't touch the ball, it's a double. So it puts him in a bad spot. Then you have an infield single where Francisco Lindor tries to come in on a ball. Guy was flying down the line. The ball wasn't hit that hard, and he's unable to make the play. So that put 2 runners on. Peterson buckled down, got out of that jam. In this game today, he threw or the slider got 9 swings, right? So the batters offered out that pitch 9 times, 5 whiffs on that slider. So that's a whiff percentage of 56%. That slider was also called for a strike 5 times. So that's a called for strike whiff percentage of 42%, meaning that he is able to throw that pitch and use it in multiple ways. He can surprise batters and hit him backdoor with the slider and maybe get a strikeout on the pitch. Or what he primarily does is he can bury the pitch and get swings on it. It sets up the sinker. It sets up his harder stuff. It allows him to use that fastball, that sinker, to get the ground balls that really allow him to be successful. In this game, he was sitting 94. He touched 96. That's new for Peterson to see the velocity where it was at. But the thing that I love about David Peterson so far this season is very simple. He's gotten 22 outs, right? 13 of those outs have been via the ground balls. That's a ground ball pitcher who's feeling himself, who is in a really good rhythm right now. And hopefully he can continue that because Taijuan Walker should not be long before he can come back. So Peterson might only have 1 or 2 more turns of the rotation, and then we'll see what happens to him. We'll see if he ends up in Syracuse or maybe even in the bullpen. It'll be interesting to see what the Mets want to do with him with how well he has been pitching. Carlos Carrasco on Saturday, I just want to mention the changeup, absolutely filthy. 10 whiffs on 16 swings, 63% whiff percentage. And what we are seeing from Carrasco is he was supposed to be last year's Chris Bassett. He just was never healthy. And even when he came back, he wasn't healthy. And throughout the offseason, I was saying, I think Carrasco's going to be fine. I would have been comfortable if the Mets didn't make the Bassett trade if they went into the year with Carrasco as the 3. And right now he is the 3 with DeGrom out. And the reason why I was comfortable about Carlos Carrasco having a bounce back season is because he has this long track record of being good, and he's not a pitcher that relies so much on velocity that I thought he couldn't rediscover it. Because if the changeup's working, if the slider's working, now he has a curveball again. If all of these offerings can be crisp and he can get into the type of rhythm he's been in the past with Cleveland, where he's able to outthink the batter, he is going to win more times than not. And here's a stat that I pulled. It was around the trade deadline last year. It was July 7th. So it was when we were in trade talk mode, when I was trying to advocate for why Carlos Carrasco was going to be a huge contributor down the stretch. And he was never healthy, so it didn't pan out. But still, the stats still hold true. Since 2014 through July 7th of last year, if you look at MLB's xFIP leaders, which is expected fielding independent pitching, it's a stat that tries to tell you what a pitcher's ERA should be, right? Here are the leaders with a minimum of 500 innings pitched from 2014 through 2020, basically. Clayton Kershaw, 2.67. Chris Sale, 2.84. Jacob deGrom, 2.91. Carlos Carrasco, 3.05. Based on xFIP for a 6-7 year sample, top 5 pitcher in baseball. That's how good he can be. That was better than Max Scherzer, by the way. So that's showing you what the Mets now have in this rotation. To have, when healthy, DeGrom, Scherzer, Bassett, Carrasco, that's the real strength of this team. And the lineup has been great. But if you get into the playoffs with those 4 guys healthy, and now also with what we're seeing from Peterson, McGill, Taijuan Walker look good early. You go into a playoff situation and you're worried about the Mets bullpen. Well, now Tyler McGill is firing 100 mile per hour out of the bullpen with the fastball playing up even more and helping shorten games for you in that pen with his ability to give you some length out there. And I'm going to be really curious what they do with McGill, because when you get the ground back, let's just say in June, your opening day starting rotation, how you plan it to be with DeGrom, Scherzer, Bassett, Carrasco, Walker, if they're all healthy and pitching well, you could see Tyler McGill with him, being at the early stage of his career, maybe a little bit of an innings limit watch. You could see the Mets use him as this sort of Swiss Army knife that they can deploy as a starter, as a reliever, even closing some games. You could see Tyler McGill go out in a tight game and pitch the sixth, seventh, eighth, and the ninth. I mean, there's a lot of ways they could use him. They could use Peterson in some interesting ways as well. So even though the bullpen is a question right now, it's better to have a really strong starting rotation to have depth there than in the bullpen. That's going to lead to more wins than anything else. And so, considering how good the lineup has looked up to this point and how good the rotation has looked, that is why I have started to remove any hedging, saying it's Mets, Braves, Mets, Braves. This is why I have now gone all in to say that this Mets team should absolutely be winning this division this year. They're the best team in the National League East. We'll see if it bears out, but the early results have been great. The thing is, now they'll face a really tough test because the San Francisco Giants are just as hot. They're coming into town on a 5-game winning streak, and we got great pitching matchups for the next 4 days. I want to talk about that more in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. Built Bars come low in calories, low in sugar, low in fat, but they are high in protein and high in fiber. They also have the Built Bar Puffs, the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat that also comes covered in that 100% real chocolate with flavors like the cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. Also good. They're sure to be your new favorite treats. And you also have new limited time flavors of Built Bars that are always coming out. So make sure you check built.com often to see what's new. And once you're there, use our promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. The New York Mets will take on the San Francisco Giants in a 4-game series at home at Citi Field this week. And it's going to be one hell of a matchup. Right now, the Giants are 7-2. The Mets are 7-3. The first two teams in baseball to get to 7 wins. The best 2 records in the National League, although the Dodgers, I believe, still play again later tonight, if I'm not mistaken. So they could certainly win their 7th game as well. They have 6 wins on the season. But the Giants, like the Mets, have won every series they have played, and they have won their last 5 games, as I mentioned before. So now you look at the pitching matchups. Alex Cobb versus Tyler McGill. Cobb has a 3.60 ERA this season. He's their latest science experiment that Faranzati has concocted. They find these guys like Anthony DeSclafani, like Kevin Gausman a few years ago, and they turn them into more than they've been. And so Alex Cobb has already had some starts this year where some of the peripherals look really good, where his stuff looks even nastier than it's ever been. It's going to be tough to hit the Giants pitching staff. It's going to be really hard. These are going to be some close games. I wouldn't be surprised that they were low scoring because it's just really good pitching. If you remember going into the season, I wrote an article for justbaseball.com ranking the top 10 starting rotations in the game right now. I also talked about it on the podcast. I believe in the episode where we were ranking starting rotations in the National League East. I have the Mets at number 3, or I had the Mets at number 3 going into the season. I had the Giants at number 4, very close to each other. Now, from what we've seen in the early season, I think the Mets have a slight edge just because they've been pitching a little bit better, but it's not really that much of an edge. I mean, and you look at the individual matchups, again, either pitcher can win any of these games. So as I said, Cobb, McGill, first game. Second game is the one you really want to circle on Tuesday. Logan Webb versus Max Scherzer. Logan Webb has become the ace of that Giants team. Maybe their next version of a Madison Bumgarner, just based on him debuting and really quickly taking the reins to lead the rotation. A 1.27 ERA in the season for Webb. Then you have Carlos Rodon versus Chris Bassett in the third game. Rodon has a 1.50 ERA. He looks healthy. He looks like the same guy he was in Chicago last year. So that's going to be really tough, but you had the lefty on the mound. So likely that's a JD Davis start game, and we'll see what the Mets can do against Rodon. Then in the last game of the series, Anthony DeSclafani versus Carlos Carrasco. It's going to be really tough. This is a team in San Francisco that is very platoon heavy. They'll have their lefty lineup, their righty lineup. Obviously, against the Mets this week, you'll face the lefty lineup. Really good players, a lot of veterans. It's going to be a tough team. They're managed well by Gabe Kapler, which is funny to say considering how bad he was when he was with the Phillies, but he's an analytical manager who's now in a franchise that is run by one of the best analytics guys in the business in Faranzati. So that's a team that is really tough to match up against, but this is another one of those measuring stick series where you can see how good the Mets really are. Because right now, we've seen them play the National League East. They have yet to play the Braves, but we've seen what it looked like against the Phillies. We saw what it looked like against the Nationals. We've yet to see what it looks like against the Marlins either. But based on what they look like against the Phillies, that was the first real measuring stick. You said, you know what? The Mets are a better team than the Phillies. And considering how Philly collapsed over the weekend against the Marlins, that's certainly bearing to be even more true. You go up against the Diamondbacks, that doesn't tell you much. Now you're going to play a team that's atop this league. The Giants were the best team in the National League last year, and they once again are atop the National League when it comes to their record. This is going to be a series where we really start to see how good the Mets can be. And the good thing is, on the other side of it, they play the Diamondbacks again, so you might be able to fatten up your record even if you struggle. Let's just say they split the 4-game set. You can still have a productive week by the end of things if you handle business when you go to Arizona. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to learn about everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.